Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Here are the headlines we are tracking this evening. Retail inflation eases to a 7-month low in February, mainly due to a fall in food prices. Eases the way for a RBI repo rate cut next month. Industrial output grows by 5% in January on the back of an uptick in manufacturing activity. Indian equities end with minor losses after a healthy intraday recovery erases most early losses. Sensex and Nifty both close around 0.1% lower, but Nifty Bank gains nearly 0.5% as financial counters find their stride. Equity mutual funds inflows take a 26% hit in February amid the market sell-off. Net inflows into mid and small cap funds see a bigger dip. Steady SIP inflows, the sole silver lining. Elon Musk's SpaceX ties up with both Jio and Bharti Airtel individually to offer Starlink's broadband services in India. Telecom department sources say Starlink is yet to comply with the prescribed security norms to qualify for a license. US government's 25% tariffs on steel come into effect from today. The European Union announces retaliatory tariffs on American products worth $28 billion. China says it will take all necessary measures to protect its interests. India is Blackstone's best-performing market globally with gross returns of 40%, says founder and CEO Stephen Schwarzman. Adds the PE firm's assets under management could double to $100 billion in the future. Also says rising global tariffs are a short-term issue that will stabilize over time. Banks conclude sale of Jayaprakash Associates loans to the National Asset Reconstruction Company for 12,000 crore rupees. 25 banks, including SBI, ICICI and Axis Bank, to collectively get 1,800 crores up front and the remaining as security receipts. The government is keen that GST rate rationalization be based on the principle of reducing the tax burden and not only on a revenue augmentation. CNBC TV18 learns that the government is not in favor of recommendations like a new 35% slab or price-based rates by the GOM on rates. The group's report is likely to be taken up at the next council meeting. Ukraine agrees to a 30-day ceasefire in the ongoing war. Russia launches an air attack on Kyiv hours after Ukraine's declaration. US says that the ball is now in Russia's court, says that it will lift the pause on intelligence sharing and resume military aid to Ukraine. Kremlin says it is waiting for America to inform them about Ukraine's proposal. Skincare startup Minimalist's co-founder and CEO Mohit Yadav tells CNBC TV18 that they will continue to run the ship even post the HUL buyout. Hope to turbocharge expansion plans with help from the FMCG behemoth. Target 15 to 20,000 stores in the next 3 years. That's an exclusive. We will come to that and much more in just a bit, but first to all the market action of the day. Indian equities end with minor losses after a healthy intraday recovery erases most early losses. Sensex and Nifty both close around 0.1% lower, but Nifty Bank gains nearly 0.5% as financial counters find their stride. Meanwhile, inflows into equity funds fell 26% in February compared to January as the market sell-off intensifies. According to Amphi data, inflows into small caps and mid caps saw a bigger dip. However, steady SIP inflows was the sole silver lining. Retail inflation eased to a 7-month low in February, largely led by fall in food prices. This has paved the way for an RBI repo rate cut next month. Meanwhile, industrial output has grown by 5% in January. Lata Venkatesh joins us now to decode the numbers. Lata.
Yes, the inflation number is lower than what the CNBC TV18 poll indicated. Ours was 3.85 and it's coming at 3.61. But 3.61 is way lower than the MPC's mandate, which is to keep inflation at 4%. So this clearly indicates that there is a scope for more rate cuts. The other important point is the Reserve Bank's forecast for Jan-Feb-March is an average inflation of 4.4%. Now with Jan and Feb, the average is working out to 3.85 and the March inflation is expected to be around 4%. So the average will be way lower than what the RBI is forecasting. Instead of 4.4, we may end up south of 4% for this quarter, which also gives reason to believe that an April rate cut is very much on the cards. The other positive from the inflation number is, of course, the food inflation number coming in at 3.75%. The CNBC TV18 poll indicated 4%. And January inflation was 6.02. For the previous 18 months, we have been between 8 and 11%. So at 3.75, this is, a multi-year low in terms of food inflation. Economists tell us now that for the next couple of years, we should not be worrying because food inflation normally follows a cycle. That will mean more rate cuts as well. So these are the positives that are coming in from the inflation number. The other positive is, of course, the IIP number coming in better than expected at 5%. The internals are even more impressive because manufacturing has come in at 5.5% for the month of January. If you take the April or January number, it is 4.2, which means January is so much better than the previous month average, which gives hope that perhaps we are going to get a slightly better growth rate for even the GDP for Jan, Feb, March, as and when it's announced. The only negative over there is that the February auto sales numbers were not as impressive. But sticking to the Jan IIP, we also have very good numbers coming in for CapEx. Capital goods is at 7.8%. It was 10.4 in December. So again, that shows that CapEx is on a strong footing. Infrastructure is at 7%. Intermediate goods at 5.2%, and consumer durables is at 7.2%. So almost all verticals of consumption and investment seem to be going very good, even on the growth front. Only consumer non-durables has not done very well. But if food inflation continues to fall, then there's a little more available for consumption. So we should see consumer non-durables also picking up. All told, this is a great double delight number. Growth higher than expected, inflation lower than expected. We should see markets reacting positively.
Thanks, Lata, for joining us with that big story. The Reserve Bank has sought government securities worth 50,000 crore rupees in the open market. This is a bid to inject liquidity into the banking system. This is the first tranche of the transaction. The second tranche will be conducted on the 18th of March for the same amount. Moving on, India's top telecom operators Jio and Airtel have joined hands with Elon Musk's SpaceX to introduce Starlink internet services in India. The agreement will help Starlink provide fast connectivity in remote areas. Ashmit Kumar explains.
Well, in the last few years, our social media feeds are full of Elon Musk's SpaceX rockets taking off and landing, making for fascinating visuals. But ever wondered what exactly were they shooting up in space? Well, the answer, a web of over 6,000 satellites to connect the entire world with internet. And in the last 24 hours, Musk has announced the first major step towards bringing that constellation here to India. Now, Musk's SpaceX-backed Starlink has inked agreements with the world's largest telecom network, Jio Platforms, and its largest competitor, Airtel. Last evening, Airtel announced the partnership with Starlink, and just hours later this morning, Jio made the big reveal. The two telecom behemoths who once looked at SpaceX as a competitor have now opted for a hybrid approach of terrestrial and satellite networks. Now, Starlink's agreement with Jio and Airtel seems to be configured towards penetrating the Indian market using the vast distribution network and on-ground presence of both the telecom bellwethers. Jio Platforms, in its release, had proposed offering Starlink solutions through its online and brick-and-mortar stores. Other than equipment, Jio also expressed willingness to provide installation, activation, and customer support solutions to Starlink. Similarly, Airtel has proposed to offer Starlink equipment in its stores. Airtel has also proposed exploring how Starlink can use Airtel's network. Additionally, Airtel is also keen on exploring how it can offer Starlink's bevy of enterprise solutions to business customers and communities. So how exactly does Starlink work? How is Starlink different? Well, broadly speaking, a terrestrial network works by connecting your mobile to the local telecom tower, lakhs and thousands that we've seen around our homes and offices. Now, Satcom works a little differently. It has no towers. Instead, Satcom players like Starlink deploy a web of low Earth orbit or LEO satellites. Users of Starlink can buy a dish for their home or business. This dish will use airwaves for transferring data and providing internet connectivity directly via the satellite. But does it make sense for India? Well, the latest data by the TRAI reveals that teledensity in urban India is at an impressive 131%. But for rural India, this number falls off a cliff to just 58%. For internet penetration, the number of those connected is pegged at 944 million. Clearly, Large geographies and large segments of the population are yet to be covered. Despite several attempts by the government, conventional telecom networks comprising of towers and fiber have struggled to cover rural and remote areas. Now, satellite-based players can help provide stable internet connection to such areas. Moreover, Starlink offers a bevy of enterprise solutions which can help businesses operating in remote areas. But there are three key regulatory hurdles that Starlink will need to cross. Number one, the DoT has maintained that Starlink is yet to address security issues. DoT officials are open to granting a license after the security concerns have been met. Similarly, Starlink also requires authorization from the space regulator in space. While in advanced stages, few issues such as monitoring and sensitive locations still remain. And finally, how will the spectrum for satellite communications be assigned and priced? Well, key questions that the TRAI is yet to answer. Now, speaking of pricing, is Starlink even affordable? Well, just for context, for residential connections, Starlink charges 31,000 rupees for equipment and a monthly charge of 4,000 rupees in Indonesia. It charges 33,000 rupees for equipment and a monthly charge of 2,100 rupees in Nigeria. This when India already has one of the lowest data charges. Now, Starlink may have taken the first big step, but there are still quite a few challenges on penetration, regulation and affordability that Musk will need to manage.
All right, let's move on. Inflation in the United States eased more than what was expected in February, coming in at 2.8% higher compared to the same month last year. On a monthly basis, CPI rose 0.2% following the 0.5% increase recorded in January. US President Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports came into effect from today with no exceptions or exemptions. The duties will affect Canada, Australia and the European Union, among others. The EU responded by announcing retaliatory tariffs on American imports worth $28 billion. These include metals, agriculture, products, motorcycles and bourbon whiskey, among others. The levies will take effect from April. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the US tariffs were entirely unjustified. However, he ruled out any reciprocal measures against US President Donald Trump, and he is also looking at other options. Now, we also saw responses from China, which has gone on to say that they will use all measures possible to retaliate. However, we are also seeing more charges come from the United States, and the US has vowed to take more actions in the days to come, especially in the run-up to 2nd April when reciprocal tariffs kick in. Let's play out some reactions.
As you know, there's a very strong man in Canada who said he was going to charge a surcharge or a tariff on electricity coming into our country. He has called and he said he's not going to do that. Okay, he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did, and he's not going to do that, so I respect that.
Will you make a different decision now about the tariffs on Canada? Will you reduce it?
At that, but probably so, yeah. He was a gentleman.
Amid the trade war between the US and China, Chinese authorities summoned Walmart executives for regulatory talks. This came after reports suggested that the American retailer asked some Chinese suppliers to cut their prices and shoulder the burden of Trump's tariffs. The social media account of the state broadcaster said Walmart's move could lead to disruptions of supply chains. Remember, the US doubled its tariffs on all Chinese goods from the 4th of February. US President Donald Trump has once again dismissed concerns about a potential recession in the country. While answering a question on the topic, Trump said, and I quote, "I don't see it at all. I think this country is going to boom," end of quote. Trump's statement comes at a time the global market is taking a massive beating amid his tariff threats.
Ruling out a potential recession seemed to rattle the stock markets. The Commerce Secretary said there wouldn't be one.
Boom. Just so you know.
Just specifically on the recession.
Yeah.
Do you think there will be a recession?
I don't see it at all. I think this country is going to boom. But as I said, I can do it the easy way or the hard way. The hard way to do it is exactly what I'm doing, but the results are going to be 20 times greater.
News outlet Politico reported that US Vice President J.D. Vance may visit India with his wife Usha later this month. If this fructifies, this will be Vance's second international trip as Vice President after his recent visit to France and Germany. This trip comes amid both nations engaged in talks on a potential bilateral trade agreement. A U.S. Embassy spokesperson told CNBC TV 18 that the Trump administration is seeking a grand deal with India and no sector is off the table. Meanwhile, the White House has reiterated its criticism of India's tariffs on American products. Speaking to reporters, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt highlighted tariffs imposed by India on American alcohol and agricultural products. She asserted that Trump believed in reciprocity and helping American workers.
You look at India, 150% tariff on American alcohol. You think that's helping Kentucky bourbon be exported into India? I don't think so. 100% tariff on agricultural products from India. Look at Japan, tariffing rice, 700%. President Trump believes in reciprocity, and it is about dang time that we have a president who actually looks out for the interests of American businesses and workers.
On to a Network 18 exclusive. Blackstone Group CEO and Chairman Stephen Schwarzman has said that the group will double its exposure in the Indian markets to $100 billion. Speaking to Money Control's Bodhisattva Ganguly, Schwarzman said that he is bullish on India as it is Blackstone's best performing market.
India happens to be our #1 performing market in the world for Blackstone. Our returns here on a gross basis are somewhere around 40% a year, way in excess of any other market. And we've spent our time building businesses in India to make India better, and we foresee being able to double where we are, to have a total exposure of $100 billion. We're very bullish on the future of the country. I know the stock market's gone down a bit lately. Right. Gets people nervous. In 20 years we've been here, this isn't the first time we've seen that.
You also have a large presence in the healthcare industry in the recent past. What are the other sectors that you could get into?
Actually, our biggest exposure here, we'll continue to do more, is in technology. Right. And in all kinds of expressions of what technology means.
The Consumer Affairs Ministry said that the CCPA is conducting a detailed investigation into the alleged differential pricing on Ola and Uber apps on Android and Apple devices. In a reply to Parliament, the ministry added that CCPA sought a reply from the cab aggregator on the issue in January. Both Ola and Uber had denied the charges and called it a misunderstanding. Banks have concluded the sale of Jaiprakash Associates loans to the National Asset Reconstruction Company for 12,000 crore rupees. Sources tell CNBC TV 18 that the 25 lenders will collectively receive 1,800 crores upfront and the remaining amount as security receipts. The transaction is expected to enhance recoveries of the SBI-led consortium in the fourth quarter of the financial year. Telecom firms BSNL and MTNL have raised close to 13,000 crore rupees from monetization of land tower and fiber since 2019. Minister of State for Communications Pemasani Chandrasekhar told Lok Sabha that BSNL earned a little over 2,300 crores since 2019 by monetizing land and buildings alone. Meanwhile, MTNL garnered 2,100 crore rupees. Onto a CNBC TV 18 exclusive now. The government is keen that GST rate rationalization be based on the principle of reducing the tax burden and not only on revenue augmentation. Sources have told CNBC TV 18 that the government is not in favor of recommendations like a new 35% slab or price-based rates by the GOM on rates. Timsi Jaipuria joins us now with the details. Timsi, what are your sources telling you?
With now all eyes on GST rate rationalization to ease the tax burden on common man, sources are indicating to CNBC TV 18 that the government is not in favor of introducing a new slab of a special rate of 35% as proposed by the GOM on GST rates. The government is also not in favor of GOM's proposal to have separate rates for items based on prices, as it believes that this could make compliance more complex. However, sources indicated that when it comes to the proposal of the GOM to consider hiking rates on items not used so frequently, such as hair dryers, curlers, specific makeup kits, amongst others, the government is in favor of bringing such items back to 28% slab. On the other hand, when it comes to food items, the broad intent in the government is to reducing the rates, and it is likely to propose to keep as many as commonly used items in the 5% slab. Sources also shared that the current rate rationalization exercise will be based on principles of reducing tax burden and not only on revenue augmentation. The government is also weighing in the option as to whether rationalization can go hand in hand with merger of slabs, along with keeping a focus on revenue neutrality, maintaining a fine balance of industry concerns, and not to have any negative impact or leading to a reduction in state finances.
Coming up on India Business Hour, skincare startup Minimalist co-founder and CEO Mohit Yadav tells CNBC TV 18 that they will continue to run the ship even post the HUL buyout. More details in some time. And you can also catch all CNBC TV 18's news and updates on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X and Jio Hotstar. At least 190 hostages have been rescued after a passenger train was hijacked by militants in Balochistan yesterday. Officials have said that at least 30 militants were killed. Reports have said that efforts to free the remaining passengers are ongoing. Reports also said that the terrorists positioned suicide bombers very close to some innocent hostages. And staying with international news, Israel has ramped up attacks on Gaza, killing at least 8 people, including a child. Israel has also returned 5 Lebanese citizens it took captive and announced talks on demarcating the Israeli-Lebanon border. Meanwhile, Hamas has announced start of a new round of negotiations with Israel after US envoy Steve Witkoff arrived in Qatar for talks. Days after a bitter exchange between President Donald Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House, Ukraine has agreed for a US-led 30-day ceasefire with Russia. Zelensky said that if Russia agrees, silence will take place immediately. Delegates from US and Ukraine held negotiations in Saudi Arabia. Earlier, the move prompted the US to resume intelligence sharing and military aid to Ukraine. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the offer will now be presented to Russia and the ball is now in their court. Kremlin said it is waiting to hear about the proposal from the US.
Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. Hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians, and we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball is now in their court.
Here's a CNBC TV 18 exclusive. Skincare startup Minimalist co-founder and CEO Mohit Yadav told CNBC TV 18 that they will continue to run the ship even post the HUL buyout. He told my colleague Shireen Bhan that they hope to turbocharge expansion plans with help from the FMCG behemoth.
You pretty much will continue to operate as an independent island within the large HUL framework. Now, how did that come about?
It was an easy decision. We needed this to happen. They were also aligned that this is how it should work, right? We should continue to operate where we are doing. We should continue to do what we have been so far. So I guess.
So you run the ship?
We run the ship, yeah. So
there's no change in that?
No change in that.
Even though ownership has changed completely?
Yeah.
Give me a sense of how you turbocharge the growth ambition and the growth plans for the company from here.
I think the 3 very easiest growth lever, one, as I said, is our offline expansion. So with them, we know which store, what data, what is relevant, not relevant, then exploring this entire piece, understanding, for the next 2 years, how many stores are relevant for us, how to plan. They already have an on-ground team. We can leverage a lot of those things, right? So I guess so far we are in some 2,000 stores, and we took almost 12 to 18 months to be here. In next 2 years, we can easily target anywhere between 15 to 20,000, right? 10 times more than what we have achieved. And all that, again, can be done very seamlessly. Second is international. While, of course, we started working in these markets, we have some bit of retail partnership. But every new market you enter, you have to, again, figure out who are the right channel partners. Yeah. You have to have those relationships and all.
And that's where the Unilever system will kick in.
And that cycle take anywhere between 4 to 6 months, right? Again, with HUL, given they are present in most of these markets.
Yeah.
And now, because of their prestige portfolio, even we know, say which channels have performed better, say for the Paula's Choice, K18, other brands, then what should be our distribution strategy? All that is now easily accessible. Third is the global R&D centers. Whatever we have been doing in terms of our own clinical studies, test, evaluating ingredient, they have been working on multiple things.
Yeah.
So we have a easy resource we can tap in.
The Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade has partnered with beauty major Estee Lauder to boost the beauty startup ecosystem in India. In an exclusive conversation with CNBC TV 18's Abhimanyu Sharma, Estee Lauder Group's president and CEO hailed the move and decoded the brand's India roadmap.
We're very delighted to sign this MOU with Startup India today. It shows our ongoing commitment to India. Beauty company, consumers happening everywhere in India, and we intend to support it that is in skincare or in makeup, in perfume, in hair care. We're seeing a lot of potential. When I was last year in October, we've announced actually manufacturing that we did for the Estee Lauder brand to support the wedding season, and we are in the middle of exploring even more opportunities to produce in India, for India, and across many of our brands.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Thank you for watching. News continues right here on CNBC TV 18.